Hi, this is your host Open Bhartia and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. We have three guests today from the Open Mainframe Project. We have Reg Harbeck, founding member of the COBOL Working Group. We have Britton, co-chair of the COBOL Working Group, and Dr. Cameron Seay, also co-chair of the COBOL Working Group. Can you please tell me quickly, what is this COBOL Working Group all about?
So, what is the COBOL Group, COBOL Working Group? It's a group that's contained within the Open Mainframe Project. And our overriding purpose is to provide accurate information about COBOL, who's using it, how they're using it, where is it used, right? The main goal is just that. It was formed by myself and Derek Britton, Lynn San Lucia, about a year ago. The main participants are myself, Derek. We're the co-chairs. Derek Britton and Cameron Seay are the co-chairs. The leaders, if you will, are Misty Decker. Misty provides a lot of analytical input, a lot of planning. Lynn San Lucia, his years in the industry helped flesh out our purpose. Derek is, a manager, major thought leader at Micro Focus. And there are other people involved. Phil Duplinski, who actually was the author of the survey that we were talking about during the session. And Gagan Kargar, Reg Harbeck also, who's a participant in this forum.
Reg, despite your own, belief, we all believe that you are one of the founding members. If I ask you, from the very early on, how have you seen the group evolve, or what are the things that you folks have been doing?
So I think it's really neat to see how, as everybody kind of got together and realized there was a need to give COBOL some visibility. COBOL is sort of the opposite of a squeaky wheel. It's like housework, as they say. Housework is something that nobody notices unless you don't do it. We've been doing COBOL so consistently for so long that everybody's forgotten that it's running the world economy. As we talked about that, we said, well, how do we wake people up to the fact that they've got this wonderful thing that they're taking for granted in order to build legitimately forward? And so as we looked at that, we realized that a great way to do that is to get out to talk to the people who know the answer and get them to tell us the answer from their perspectives and bring it together and then share it with everybody else.
Right. And Cameron, as Reg was explaining, that kind of it touched upon what we are trying to do with the group. But if I ask you, if you can just narrow it down, that what is the main goal of this group?
So the main goal is accurate analysis, accurate data about COBOL, and peripherally COBOL curriculum. Now there is another group within the Open Mainframe Project, the COBOL course, headed by Sudharshna Srinivasan. I think that's pronunciation of her last name. And they're separate, but we're intertwined. So.
As you're saying, COBOL is still important, and we have been, people may say whatever they want to say about all these technologies. The fact is that it's still being used. A lot of very critical applications that are being powered there. So if I ask you that why COBOL is still, I would say the words relevant, but if I say what is the significance of COBOL in today's modern world?
In terms of the relevance of COBOL, COBOL is still a very relevant language. It drives the world's economy. It is used by every big bank, every big corporate entity, retailers, insurance companies, and government agencies, and the global economy is dependent upon COBOL code. So that code is pervasive. It is pervasive. It processes the overwhelming majority of credit card and ATM transactions that we use on a day-to-day basis. And so there are a lot of other things that it does in processing data. And the reason for that is that COBOL is very simple and very fast and very secure. So it's the perfect language. Modern languages can't do it any better. Some of them can do it as well, but they've not found a platform that will perform the data processing any better than COBOL from a language standpoint.
Excellent. Derek, as he was saying, he teaches that there are students. If I ask you, COBOL has been around for so long, he also said it's very simple, what are the challenges that are there? But again, it's kind of ironic to ask, if we talk about things like Java or COBOL, they are not the challenges that a lot of new languages face. But what are the challenges that you see as part of the working group that you see, hey, these are the problems that we need to deal with? What are those, and how you folks have been dealing with those problems? And if you look back and you say, hey, you know what, we have achieved this much, we have solved these problems, and this is our achievement. So it's a three-piece question there. Please go ahead and tell me what you think.
It's a great question. I think, if we look at, bearing in mind that we've only been running for, a short while, we're only set up in 2020. So this is only really our first full calendar year. And as Cameron was saying, we set up to define, effectively to understand an objective truth about the language, and using that truth to then set about educating the rest of the COBOL community and the wider market on its importance and its value. And so sort of this year, setting up and defining the mission was sort of foundational for us. And of course, we report back to the Open Mainframe Project. So we've reported back an increase in the number of engagements that this group has held in terms of whether it's press articles or blogs or interviews like this one, or conference participation at places like GSE and the ECC conference. So, the point of the exercise was to give COBOL a bit more airtime and get an appreciation and understanding out there to the COBOL community and the mainframe community about its continued existence, its continued importance, because actually it's very important that the conversation about COBOL takes place in the first place. So that was absolutely foundational, and it's great to see that it's actually an exception rather than the rule now to see an event that, a mainframe event that doesn't have COBOL on the agenda. So that's a really good stride forward for us as a group. But perhaps more importantly, some of the milestones that we've also achieved in a more practical sense. And I know Reg will cover this when he talks about the survey, but the results of that survey, it was a lot of work to go through to get the information, but we wanted that objective truth. We didn't want to speculate. We didn't want to have a rhetorical discussion about COBOL and its value. We wanted to set the record straight. And I think that's what that survey gave us the opportunity to do so. And I won't steal Reg's thunder anymore by describing exactly what we did. But in addition to that, the additional milestones for the year that we've been able to achieve have been sort of side projects that help then illustrate the use cases around COBOL that we can then take to the wider Open Mainframe Project and the mainframe community at large and say, look at what you can use this stuff for. Now you know it's valuable. Here are some practical applications for it in 2021 and obviously into 2022 and beyond.
There have been a lot of use cases where COBOL has been used. We now live in a totally cloud native world. Have you seen some new use cases where, COBOL is suddenly, playing a role in a use case where you're like, oh, we were expecting some modern language like Rust there or Go there, but suddenly there. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Well, speaking personally, it happens more often than most people give COBOL credit for. And that's perhaps one of the things that we'll be looking for in the future. When you think about large-scale change in the mainframe world, the mainframe ecosystem, people typically think about, trying to unravel monolithic systems and recreate exciting new dynamic object-based systems that are, microservices in nature using, containerization, that kind of thing, collaborating with cloud systems. Well, everything I've just said is possible from within a COBOL context. You can unravel a monolithic COBOL-based application and recreate microservices and deploy as a container quite comfortably with COBOL. And the good news is that most of that application works because it's already working, it's already running the business. It's how you unravel it and reuse it and repackage it is it's actually quite breathtaking to see what's possible and how quickly that's possible. And it's a much smarter way of innovating if you know that the building blocks are, they're already proven.
Right. You're absolutely right. Now, of course, Reg, I'll come to you and ask about the survey. First of all, tell us a bit about what was the survey all about? What was the goal? What you are trying to achieve with the survey? And then, of course, key findings there.
Sure. So what we decided is we needed to reach out to the people who are actually right there working with COBOL, the organizations, the individuals, the professionals, the programmers, and their management, and say, what is happening with COBOL? How much COBOL are you using? Are you increasing or decreasing your investment in COBOL? How critical is it? How about the people that are working with it? And so we wanted to find that out, as Derek pointed out, we want to find an objective truth about this. We don't want to just go with our attitude, because everybody in the mainframe and COBOL spaces, have a pretty good idea of what's the case out there, and they tell each other this, but that's not good enough. We have to go with, provable facts. And so we then sat down and said, what questions do we want to ask them? What information do we need that we can actually use moving forward, including, can we not merely look at face value, but process and dig deeper into it? And so having put together over several iterations, a list of questions that were sufficiently succinct that people would take the time to answer them, but sufficiently in depth that the answers would be meaningful, including characterization, demographic characterization, roles, companies, that sort of thing. Then we said, okay, now who do we send it out to? And so we identified our contacts, and we identified those places, such as, for example, social media groups that had COBOL or mainframe and other places, and then sent the word out, also using things such as Twitter, to get as many responses as possible in order to have a sort of critical mass of responses. And once we had the survey out there for enough time and gotten enough respondents, then we, first of all, just did some initial measurement and even wrote an article about it, what was the essence of what we got. But then we had some folks work through the data in depth and do some in-depth discovery and findings about that. What does this data really tell us? And while we have some really interesting detailed findings, and in fact we have an article on the Tech Channel website that you can see that digs into that, the three core findings that we found, well, first of all, is that after carefully analyzing the data and projecting with great caution and conscientiousness, that it is really evident that there's over 250 billion lines of COBOL running the world economy today. That is an absolutely startling number, because that is not a number you can provably say about anything else, that is running business computing. And the beauty of it is, not only is this COBOL, new programs are being written, it's also programs that have been around sometimes for decades, working so well and tried and proven. And so that was our first finding. And then we were able to map that to different industries, and we have, again, this article talks about that. But the second finding we found is that COBOL is not going away. It is actually alive and well and very healthy. And so that the number of COBOL applications that are actually being stabilized is exceptionally small, and those that aren't being stabilized aren't necessarily being displaced with non-COBOL applications. And so you've got this realization that COBOL is very much a going concern, and is going forward that organizations have a future of COBOL where it's going to continue or increase in its presence, even with a small number of applications being deprecated. And the final thing we found, though, and this was a real issue, is that there is a need for organizations to therefore wake up and start getting their staffing current with their inevitable investment and presence of COBOL, because there's been a failure in both mainframe and COBOL systems for quite a while now of management and HR to realize they need to have a pipeline of new people getting mentored into place while the current people are there, because there is this need and this opportunity not only to keep the current 250 billion and growing number of lines of COBOL active, but to start finding new ways to enhance and build on that, and to have people with new insights and with a long career trajectory ahead of them to be part of that future of COBOL and of the world economy.
If you just reflect on this survey, there are a lot of, of course, findings that are there. How is it going to also kind of impact or change the way the working group works, as we talked about the challenge and everything? So what are the learnings? How are going to translate the learning into actions to help the community?
And this is important. This is one of the big questions we have in the world of legacy computing, of the computing that runs the world. I say legacy not as a negative word, but as, where it says, hey, it works, it's proven, it's tried and proven, is how do you get the word out about what works? How do you get the word out about what you can take for granted when everybody wants to know about the stuff they don't know for sure they can trust? And so this is one of our big questions. And one of the ways we're doing it, of course, is writing articles, giving presentations, and reaching out and communicating, first of all, to the choir, preaching to the choir, but preaching to the choir and saying, now go out and sing to the rest of the world. But we're also looking for other ways to get this word out. And this is one of the eternal questions that we're trying to answer as part of our group is, how do we get the word out to decision makers and influencers to understand that there is something out there that works so well, that it's the one language we trust to run all of the business of the world economy, and that they really need to be making decisions that aren't based on the latest thing, but based on what works, what's proven, and what do we know we can trust, and what do we know we can build on, and then decide how to build on that. And so this is absolutely an important question we are working very hard to answer. And I would love to hear our two other interlocutors' thoughts about that as well, because we've been thinking out loud about this a lot.
Cameron, I'll ask you, looking at this survey, the findings, how do you see, it can help the community?
The relevance of the survey, purpose of the survey, the benefit of the survey to the community, it provides a foundation, a solid knowledge foundation for us to begin to do further, more intricate analysis on how COBOL is used and to promote it. That is another, I neglected to say that about the function of the purpose of the COBOL Working Group. It is to promote COBOL. Right? Because COBOL is essential, and we want people to understand COBOL is essential. And so the survey is an instrument by which we can make that case to the public at large, that COBOL is important and it needs to be given some consideration. It needs to be taught. Right? It needs to be taught. It needs to be appreciated for what it is.
Derek, same question for you there.
Yeah, well, it's hard to predict sometimes the possible future that we perceive now. Of course, to a certain extent, we're preaching to the choir. We are the choir. We already believe this. We already believe this to be true. And so, as pioneers of what we believe to be the right idea and the objective truth, of course, we have to imagine a world where everyone agrees with us. But if I'm honest, what we've done so far really is only build the foundations for the COBOL community to believe these things are even possible. So I think what we now need to do, sort of if you define the future as the next chapter, if you like, is pulling together the story of so far of the evidence that we've collected and the possibilities that we see of the value of COBOL, the technology, but then also bring in the sort of related adjacent things that the rest of the OMP is looking at, things like the tooling, things like the training, and things like specific projects talking about specific use cases for the technology, to pull together a unified, combined voice that the broader community can then use to create a single global voice to remind the market of the profound and enduring contemporary value of the technology. And that's a fairly lofty ambition, because right now it's a few people saying that something is a good idea. And so it is all about creating a groundswell, snowballing the idea. But I think that's the next stage, to define the steps required to get us there. Now, the good news is there are a number of parts of the OMP that are already investigating some of those use cases. Tremendous work being done around the COBOL technology. It's now a case of binding those things together and saying, right, collectively, what does this mean for the marketplace? So, if you think about some of the initiatives around COBOL-based modernization, if you think about the initiatives around COBOL training, also, we're trying to tackle the question about what to do about getting COBOL into the hands of would-be programmers who don't necessarily have ready access to COBOL compilers today. They might not even have ready access to the mainframe today. How do we tackle that question? We're trying to think about all of the possible likely obstacles that the next generation of COBOL programmers may face, to ensure that, when Cameron teaches a class, it's as full as it always is with him today, but going forward, but for every other professor in every other class in every other college, we want to build that groundswell of interest in the technology by, creating enough demand out there. And I think it's everyone's job to pull together and explain and define those opportunities and what it presents for the future. So I think kind of going forward, the next challenge will be, how do we unify this into a common set of voices that we can share with the wider marketplace? And I know it's possible because, the facts are telling us that it's still as relevant as ever. So we've got to find a way to make sure that the next generation is as comfortable with COBOL as we are.
Excellent. Those were great insights. You brought Open Mainframe Project in there. Can you share, how does this group work with other mainframe projects, Open Mainframe Project, because there are so many projects within Open Mainframe Project?
Well, it ties back to what I've just been talking about, really. I mean, the Open Mainframe Project is, I've always characterized it as the safe zone for people to share great ideas about, how to take the mainframe forward. And of course, COBOL is, it is synonymous with mainframe. It is the language of choice for big mainframe systems. It's where grown-ups go if they need to build trusted mainframe applications. So it's great to see, and in fact, part of the reason why the COBOL Working Group was set up under the auspices of the OMP is because we saw so much in terms of the ongoing discussions around COBOL in the other groups as well. So the training course, for example, educating new programmers into what's possible with COBOL, providing access to those tools. Of course, we are in lockstep with what they're doing because we want to promote what they're doing to effectively reinforce the value statement around the language that we're trying to portray. But also, there are a number of other more technical initiatives, shall we say, around how you would use COBOL today, not just in terms of the tooling and the IDEs and how the programmer interacts with it, but also the kind of application use cases that COBOL can be used for. I talked about microservices and cloud and containers earlier on in the interview. All of these things are possible today, but all of these things must be possible to anyone who has ready access to COBOL. They can't take my word for it, and they can't have to go to an expensive consultant. They need to be able to do this stuff for themselves. So creating tooling through the OMP or initiatives through the OMP is a great way to show that, because it then demonstrates practically what's possible. And I think what you need is, you need us as the cheerleaders, but you need the practicality behind it to show and demonstrate what's possible so that people can actually self-serve and discover COBOL for themselves.
Cameron, Reg, Derek, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about not only, of course, the working group, the survey, and also more interestingly that, the COBOL is still, growing strong. There are so many exciting things. So thanks for the work that you folks are doing. And I would love to have you back on the show as usual. But thanks for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.